We've taken to the road. We're on a mission to interview successful entrepreneurs. 90% of startups fail, and we want to help change those stats. Next stop, Manchester. Safe from Arctic Shore discusses scaling success and how being bold can work for and against you when pitching. When it comes to expanding, some expand too early, some expand too late. How have you found it?
To be honest, it's hard to get it right. It's as simple as that. If you do expand too late, you've missed the boat. If you expand too early, you burn through your cash. So it's a question of, and ask me again in a year's time whether we've got it right. But it's a question of actually identifying the market, where the market is, and actually deploying that money that you've raised as wisely as possible. And so far so good. We've identified the market. We have grown the staff in that market carefully. And responded to it. And I think it's too easy actually when you have money in the bank to say, I've got the money in the bank, let's spend it, let's just go for it. And there is a certain American model which says, hey, I've got the cash, let's go for it. I think what's worked for us is to use the money, hire people, and then reassess. And then hire more people and reassess and see how it's going.
How many different rounds of funding did it take to raise that amount?
That is a great question. We've had 3 major rounds of funding to get to this point. To be honest, in between we've had some smaller rounds and some seed rounds as well to get us to this point.
And what was, obviously, because people watching this show, I think 95% are raising or are thinking of raising money. What was the difference between that early stage raising to your last raise, which was the biggest? What was the major difference between each round?
They're utterly different. I mean, I remember the experience I had of our very first fundraise. It was a small check, and it was actually a check as well, which was bizarre. And it was more or less, who are you? And then who are you? My co-founder, Robert. Great. And what are your backgrounds? Okay, great. What are you doing? Oh yeah, that sounds good. Fine. Who do I write the check to? I mean, it was like that.
Wow.
It was about the dream that you're trying to sell.
Yeah.
And it was about you and your ability to actually, I suppose, execute that dream ultimately.
Yeah.
For the more recent round, it's a bit more like being dragged across the coals, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
You have a history. And you have to show that history, what you did well, what you didn't, what the numbers were. And then, again, you have a plan. You still have a dream, but you have to justify it. And you justify it with data. You justify it with spreadsheets. There's much more due diligence. But at the same time, I wouldn't say it's any harder or easier. Ultimately, you do have that track record, and therefore you can rely on the track record. Whereas in the earlier days, all you have to have is ultimately is trust.
With the money that you raised, I know every company is different, right? And I was only reading the Alibaba book there recently enough, and he had raised money at the time, Jack Ma had raised money. And the reason that they actually did so well was they didn't need to spend the money, and they didn't spend the money. With the money you raised, the 4.5, have you planned to use that over a certain period, like 6 months, 12 months or longer?
You'll find when you're raising money that your plan has to use the money. I mean, ultimately, an investor's giving you that money to invest. And it's an interesting point you were saying about Jack Ma. Ultimately, I mean, ideally, you would grow your business on as little cash as possible. I mean, that's the dream. So ultimately, as long as you're treating the money that you're given as an investment, it's about how can I get a return on that investment. So short answer to your question is absolutely, you have to spend that money within a certain time period, and that's what you're agreeing to do.
So part of that money was to, I think Mark said at the beginning, is to expand internationally, which means remote teams, which is such a hot topic at the minute. We had chatted in the beginning off camera, but like the WordPress, all staff, 3,000.
Absolutely.
Someone's going to crucify me if that's wrong, but it's a lot. It's a lot of staff.
You better check that one up.
I'll do a voiceover, fix it. But that's impressive having that many people. What struggles are you having with remote teams? Obviously, culture being a huge hot topic as well at the minute. Keeping that culture of Arctic shores while expanding internationally. Well, how difficult is that?
It is difficult, and it is only made easier if you're constantly thinking about it. So we have ultimately a great senior management team that is constantly thinking about, okay, remotely, who have I got remotely? Who do I need to pull into conversations? You talk about culture. I mean, part of culture is our way of working and our way of communicating. So it's adding a little bit more formality, I suppose, around how we communicate. Do we always stay on Slack? Do we always have an ability to fire up our webcams and maybe have a Hangouts chat? And so we're still grappling with this, actually. I can't say that we've solved it, but that's the only way we're going to keep the remote teams on board. So there's the functional side. which is, how do we make sure we keep them on board and communicate? And absolutely, in terms of the culture, how do we ensure that they feel a part of Arctic Shores? And that's not just to make them happy, for want of a word. Actually, they're representing Arctic Shores, and they should feel part of the fold, and they're able to deliver our vision ultimately by feeling part of Arctic Shores.
Everyone kind of learns from their own mistakes, right? And what we're trying to do is try and help people before they make the mistake to kind of learn from other people's mistakes. When it came to expanding, is there anything that you came across that you didn't expect? You were, oh, I didn't know that was going to happen, or didn't go to plan, or could have done something differently? Is there anything that stuck out?
That's a really good question. I am going to come back to people. And actually, ultimately, what you mentioned before, I think it's too easy to say we need to expand, we need to spend the money now, I need to get an office, I need to maybe set up a small company in that region abroad, hire people, and then off we go. Yeah. I think a bit more planning around the strategy of how you're going to bring people into the fold would have really helped us, actually.
In what way?
So really identifying what it is that might make things go wrong. Are they sort of tied into the schedule of meetings that we have? What meetings do they need to be involved in? What information are we sharing that actually they should really know, but we're getting on and sharing it anyway because we're stood next to the coffee machine and we're making decisions here in the absence of them. We're getting a lot better at that, but I think that's the key thing for us, that actually if I was to go back again, we'd try and do that better.
There's a lot of trust though, isn't there?
Has to be.
There's only two founders? And you can only be in two locations at any one time. So when you do have other locations, there's a lot of trust in senior management. Has that been a struggle?
So when it comes to myself and my co-founder, if there's anything that's been the bedrock of Arctic Shores, it's that trust that we have between us. Whatever issues we have, we can talk about them. Whatever problems we have to solve, we will always talk about them. And we're always in touch. And I don't think this would have happened without that.
Is your co-founder based here with you, or is he a different office?
He's actually based in London, as it happens. So in Manchester, our head office, I'm very proud that the product development happens, and in a way it's the nerve centre, but actually a fantastic team, a large team as well in London that's more focused on the delivery of services and the sales side of things. And we also have a great science team, mainly based in London as well.
Just one last thing, because I think we're probably running out of time, but one last thing going back to funding. Obviously, you're going to VCs to get funding for a round, and you need to show the growth, right? You need to say, this is going to be our growth once you pump this money in. And it's important that those figures excite them, right? Isn't that, they need to be excited about the growth. Is there a risk of going in with figures that are too exciting, and then it can cut you off from the next round if you don't hit those figures?
Like over-promising and under-delivering sort of thing? Yeah.
There is, and it's funny actually, so different VCs will have a different view on that. And it almost shows how the VC market, the market between people trying to raise money and people trying to give money, is not particularly fluid. Because I remember going to some VCs and them saying, oh gosh, your figures and what you're trying to achieve, that's just way out there. I don't think you can achieve that, and therefore we can't speak to you. And then
but you need to be bold as well, don't you?
But you do need to be bold. So there are other VCs that are saying, you're not being sort of what's the word?
Bold
exactly,
enough.
bold. You're not being bold enough. You're in a great space here, and the market's ripe, and you're doing something amazing, which obviously I always like to hear. And you should be aiming higher. So where do you pitch it? Ultimately, you need to pitch it as bold as possible, but that's comfortable for you. And actually, you'll be matched with the right VC by doing that.
Are you going to go for another round of funding? Is that in the pipeline?
Do you know what? Every single time we go for a round of funding, the answer should be no, because it's a lot of work. But frankly, if there's an opportunity out there, and there's an opportunity to raise money and invest that money and grow the company more, and I suppose continue to do what we really believe in, then of course we'll raise money.
Well, one bit of advice I heard about raising money is raise money when you don't need it. Because if you're going to go raise money when you do need it, it's nearly too late.
You're absolutely right.
So.
Interesting.
Enjoyed the video? Like to see more? Subscribe below.